All right, guys, welcome back to another video. So for this video, guys, we already ranked our quarterbacks for the NFL at midseason. So why not move on to our, at this point, three-quarter, two-thirds season coaches tier list. So this one should also be controversial and heavily opinionated, but this one should also be very fun. Now, keep in mind that this tier list was not made by me, so whoever made it probably at the beginning of the season because some of these coaches have been canned, at least a couple, but we will just rank the current coach. But with that being said, guys, we are going to start with our NFL coaches tier list. At this point in time, we're starting with the randomized order in which we are presented. First, Andy Reid. We are starting with a great coach who's been at it forever. Obviously, a phenomenal coach, Super Bowl champion, nothing left to do on his resume. I think Andy Reid is an S-tier coach. He's made Alex Smith look great. He's made Donovan McNabb look great, Michael Vick, and now, of course, Patrick Mahomes. Great offensive schemes, veteran, players love playing for him. I think Andy Reid is an easy S-tier to open up this ranking. So next we have, I think that's Arthur Smith for the Falcons. Arthur Smith, this one's kind of tough because he's not terrible. The Falcons are playing pretty well this year, better than we thought. I'm going to say he's a C-tier coach. I think he's pretty average. He's not bad. It's just that offense should be better. I don't think he uses his receivers and his tight end, of course, Kyle Pitts, as well as he should. Considering that this guy's an offensive mind, they hired him to be an offensive specialist. The Falcons' offense is kind of stagnant at times and not as good as it probably should be. So I think he's an average coach. Not terrible, though. Next, we have Bill Belichick. Now, look. B team Tom Brady, B team Bill Belichick, but the man is an S-tier coach. Always a great defensive coach, veteran, 6 Super Bowl rings. How can you ever argue that? Bill Belichick is indefinitely and forever, for as long as he's the Pats coach, an S-tier coach. Shuts down all the young quarterbacks, as we just saw with Zach Wilson and the Jets. But then again, everyone shuts down Zach Wilson. He actually shuts down himself. But regardless, it's Bill Belichick, obviously S-tier. Next, we have Brandon Staley. So Brandon Staley gets a lot of criticism because of his questionable play calling. Sometimes he's too bold. That timeout from the make or break game from last year, last game of the year against the Raiders, was very questionable. But regardless, he's a very good offensive coach. The Chargers offense, he's made Justin Herbert look great. Defense, well, not so much, in questionable play calling. I still think he's a pretty good coach. I actually think Brandon Staley is a B-tier coach, at least for an offensive coach. Makes the quarterback look pretty good. Justin Herbert has done well under him, so I will give Brandon Staley the B-tier nod. Next, we have Brian Daboll, who is off to a very good start in his first year as a head coach of the Giants. They are 7-3, way better than we thought. Are they overachieving a little bit? Possibly. But does Brian Daboll deserve a lot of credit? Yes. That offense, it's a little stagnant. I think they're due for some regression. I think he's doing a good job of preventing Daniel Jones from beating himself, and I think he's done a very good job defensively. I think he's so far, it looks like a pretty good coach. I think he's a B-tier coach. I need to see a little bit more. I think the Giants have benefited from some, not luck, but I don't think they're as good as their record. But regardless, Brian Daboll has been presented what he's been presented, this team, and he's turned them into a good, very good team, probably a playoff team, at least right now, and he's made Saquon Barkley look good, so credit to him. Bruce Arians, this should actually be Todd Bowles, who took the reins from Bruce Arians this year for the Bucs. Todd Bowles is a great defensive coach, as many of you know, but this Bucs offense, we're talking about right now, it's not good. This season, for the most part, it has not been good. So Todd Bowles, I'm going to give him a B-tier ranking. I think he's a veteran presence of a coach, even though it's his first coaching job in a while since the Jets. He doesn't have a ton of years coaching. He still is a great defensive coach, veteran coach, knows what he's doing, so I think he's a B-tier coach. Next, we have Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell gets an S-tier for motivation, and players love him, but also at the end of the day, ultimately, how are you performing on the field? And I might have, this is kind of tough. I might have said C tier, But the Lions have been pretty good recently. You know what? I'm going to keep Dan Campbell in the C tier. The Lions have won 3 in a row. I think he's a pretty decent coach. He's the type of coach I would love to play for, but results-wise, he hasn't done enough to be above C tier, and, he's made his own handful of mistakes. So I love Dan Campbell, but I'm going to say C tier. Dennis Allen, I think Dennis Allen is also C tier because I think he's a really good defensive coach. Obviously, he was the Saints defensive coordinator, and he took the reins from Sean Payton. And the Saints defense is still pretty good, but that offense does not look good. I think he gets too predictable with Taysom Hill. I don't think he's using Alvin Kamara as well as he should. So I think I don't want to say it's his fault, but the offense has not looked good this year, and the Saints are probably not a playoff team. So I think Dennis Allen is in the C tier. Doug Peterson, my Jags coach, I'm going to say Doug Peterson has a Super Bowl, of course. I think he probably is the answer for the Jags. I've been happy with him as the coach. He's made Trevor Lawrence look a lot better than the legendary Urban Meyer did last year. This team is definitely better. The offense is pretty good. They move the ball. It's just they lose a lot of games through methods that are not his fault. A lot of, dumb red zone turnovers and rookie mistakes from a young team. I think Doug Peterson is the answer. I think he's a good coach. I think Doug Peterson is in the B tier. At the end of the day, maybe he was A tier when he won the Super Bowl with the Eagles, but I need to see the Jags be at least a little better than 3-7, even though they probably should be for him to regain his A tier value. But I'm really happy with Doug Peterson. Frank Reich, I might have said D or C tier, but it's now Jeff Saturday, and I just don't. It's been 2 games. Jeff Saturday's 1-1. Players love him. I heard he's a great guy, knows the game of football really well, being a former center. So what do we do? We're going to combine Frank Reich and Jeff Saturday and just give them a C tier. Frank Reich was probably C tier. Maybe you can argue D tier, but Jeff Saturday, default C tier just because we haven't seen much. But he looks pretty decent. We'll see. But let's just put both of them in C tier, just for the heck of it, because I can't really think of another tier to put them in. John Harbaugh of the Ravens, he's been their coach for a long time. He's won a Super Bowl, usually has a really good defense, and I think he's done a really good job of making this a Lamar-centric offense and getting a lot out of Lamar Jackson, obviously. He was an MVP under John Harbaugh. Maybe a couple years ago you could argue S tier, but I think that John Harbaugh needs to switch up this offense and at least add a little bit more to the passing game. I think that he could utilize his receivers more, because in playoff games, I think they rely too much on their run game and Lamar's legs. I think John Harbaugh should open up the pass game a little bit more. I still think he's a very good coach. I'm going to put him in A tier. Players love playing for him, but I don't think he's quite S tier. Maybe anymore, or maybe he's never quite been there, but I think he's a very, very good coach. Josh McDaniels, oh my God, this one's going to be tough because it's his first year as a coach. He's not really doing well, but the offense of the Raiders isn't horrible, so I'm going to put Josh McDaniels in C tier. I think he's a good offensive mind, obviously being Tom Brady's offensive coordinator forever in New England, but this Raiders team, at the end of the day, it's a results-driven league, and they're underachieving, the Raiders, and Josh McDaniels is not a guarantee to be back next year. Has not been a great debut for him, so I'm going to put him in C tier. Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings coach, he's done a very good job in his first year as the head coach. Rams, he's former Ram coach or member of the coaching staff. Great offensive mind. The Vikings are 8-2. Overachieving, doing a great job, surprising people, winning the division. Kevin O'Connell has done a great job in his first year. I'm going to put him in B tier only because I want to see a little bit more of a sample size, but he's doing a very good job, and I think maybe a year from now he could be in the A tier. Next we have, I think that's Kevin Stefanski. I don't really know with him because for a while, his first year he looked pretty good, with Baker Mayfield actually playing well, and he won a playoff game, but the Browns have kind of regressed the last couple of years. Not fully his fault. They have a great offensive line. He does a good job with the run game, but I don't think he's... this is kind of tough. I'm going to put Stefanski in C tier. I think the last couple years have kind of lowered him from maybe a B tier coach. I think he's a decent coach. Not entirely his fault, but still, I don't think he's a great coach. Cliff Kingsbury, oh my, he started off really well, but to be honest, I don't think he's a bad coach. But he might not be their coach next year if the Cardinals don't make the playoffs. I'm going to put him in C tier only because his track record of being a good quarterbacks coach, I guess, takes him out of D tier. So I got to give him some credit for that. But at the end of the day, I think Cliff Kingsbury is probably just an average coach at best. So I will put him in C tier. Next we have, hang on, Kyle Shanahan. Okay, Kyle Shanahan is obviously a great coach. I don't think he's quite S tier. He doesn't have a Super Bowl, but I will put him in A tier. Great run game. Any running back, Kyle Shanahan will turn him into a great one. I think he does a good job with Jimmy G and manufacturing the offense around him. So obviously I think he's a very good coach, and he's been a great coach from day one. So definitely one of the reasons the Niners are a contending team pretty much every year. A tier for Kyle Shanahan. Next we have Lovie Smith. I mean, I think he's a good defensive coach. He used to be the Bears coach. I mean, most of his teams usually have good defenses. It's not his fault that the Texans are the Texans, so I can't really blame him too much. I'm going to put Lovie Smith in C tier. I think he's a decent coach, but at the end of the day, the results don't help him at all. So for that reason, I will put him in C tier. Okay, next we have Matt Eberflus. So it's his first year as the Bears coach, and it comes from the Colts. The offense maybe is a little bit better than last year. I don't know if it's credit to him, but it's really just Justin Fields becoming an absolute unit on the ground. I don't think Eberflus has done a terrible job, but he hasn't been great either, and the Bears, they can sometimes be tough to watch, even though they are playing a little better. I think Eberflus is a C-tier coach. Next, we have Matt LaFleur, and he started off his career very well. I mean, he reignited Aaron Rodgers. At first, there was some turmoil between them. They didn't get along, but then the last 2 years, Aaron Rodgers was the MVP. Packers were a contending team the last couple years. Not so much this year, but I just think that's because they don't really have any receivers or help for Aaron Rodgers' injured offensive line. It's not really his fault. I think Matt LaFleur is a good coach. I think he's in the B tier, in my opinion. Next, we have Matt Rule, this is one of the guys that I mentioned earlier. The man got canned, and he deserved it because he was a D-tier, horrible head coach. Now it's Steve Wilks, and this Panthers offense I know it's only a few games, but they don't look better. You know what? They might even look worse with Steve Wilks. I mean, they scored 3 points against a Ravens defense that has not been that good this year. Whoever you want to say, Steve Wilks, Matt Rule, both of them combined to make our first D-tier coach of the video, of the tier list so far. So now all the tiers have been filled officially. Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys coach. I mean, he won a Super Bowl with the Packers, but I think a lot of us NFL fans know that he's one of the lesser coaches to win a Super Bowl. Not a great coach, although the Cowboys look really good right now. So maybe last year, his decision-making's questionable, but at the end of the day, his teams somehow always find a way to be good and probably be a playoff team, probably be a contender. So I can't fully fault him. I mean, he's doing something right. So I think Mike McCarthy, despite the criticisms, does not deserve D tier. I think he's a decent coach. I put him in C tier. Mike McDaniel, the Dolphins coach, first-year head coach. And you know what? I think of all the coaches, first-year coaches, I think he's done the best job. He's turned Tua from a borderline, questionable NFL starter to an MVP candidate. They have not lost a game that Tua has started and finished. The Dolphins are 7-3. Could not have been a better starting season for Mike McDaniel. He's made Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle the most lethal receiver duo. He deserves a ton of credit. I think he's in the A tier. Is it a little premature? Maybe, but am I biased because I think he's a funny guy and the Dolphins are fun to watch and I'm happy for Tua and that's one of the more exciting teams and maybe a dark horse contender? Yes to all of that. But I like Mike McDaniel. I think he's in the A tier. Next, we have Mike Tomlin. There's a lot of Mikes in this league. Mike Tomlin, veteran coach, Super Bowl champion. Players love him. He's a good motivator, good commander, and he's a good commander and leader of men, I would say. But this offense has problems, and I think He's sometimes been criticized for some of his schemes and predictable offensive schemes. He's a good defensive coach, but this offense has been tough. I think Mike Tomlin's a good coach, very solid. I think he's in the B tier. I don't think he's a great coach, at least not anymore. As of late, I mean, he's good. He's very good, but I don't think he's great, so I will put him in B tier. Mike Vrabel, how many Mikes do we have in this league? It's like, I don't know, 5 at least. Anyway, Mike Vrabel, okay, this is where we get a little interesting because he's not the type of coach that I would say this, but if I'm being completely honest, just in my opinion, I think Mike Vrabel is an S tier coach because, yes, he doesn't have a Super Bowl. He hasn't been a coach for that long, but this Titans team continuously every year outperforms our expectations. I know they have Derrick Henry, but with Ryan Tannehill, Mike Vrabel, I mean, makes that defense look good. He makes Ryan Tannehill look good. He takes Ryan Tannehill and makes the Titans a 1 seed in the AFC last year, and this year they're running away with the division. Players love him. He's a great motivator, great energy, an exceptional S-tier coach. I mean, exceptional according to the blueprint because he doesn't have a Super Bowl, never been to a Super Bowl, but I don't care. Mike Vrabel, his teams continuously do better than we expect, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Nathaniel Hackett, another rookie head coach. Well, we've had a handful of them already. Nathaniel Hackett, it's been a disaster. Obviously, us NFL fans know this. Broncos looked horrible. Russell Wilson, he cannot ride anything. No Broncos country riding this year at all. They're going to miss the playoffs. Criminally disappointing year right from the get-go for Nathaniel Hackett. I think he's in the D tier. I think Steve Wilks has company. Steve Wilks and Matt Rule have company. It's been a disastrous year for Nathaniel Hackett. So we move on to Nick Sirianni, who's had a very nice year as the Eagles coach. I think he's done a good job kind of tailoring this Eagles offense to Jalen Hurts' skill set. He's done a good job of unlocking Jalen Hurts' passing abilities as well. The Eagles are 9-1. Sirianni deserves a lot of credit. I think he's a very solid coach. Is he quite A tier? You know what? It might be a little bold. I'm going to put Sirianni in A tier. I think he deserves it. He's made Jalen Hurts look really good. He's been the coach for 2 years, and they're going to have 2 playoff appearances. So he's done a very good job. One of the better young head coaches. Pete Carroll. Look, Pete Carroll has taken some criticism, but what you can't take away from him is that the players love playing for this guy. He's a Super Bowl champion, and the Seahawks, against all odds, through 2/3 of the season, are in first place in the NFC West. So Pete Carroll, I think, has regained a lot of his greatness. And I think we have our 4th S-tier coach. I think Pete Carroll this year has reestablished himself as one of the better coaches in the league after a couple down years. I don't know if he wants to just stick it to Russell Wilson, but whatever it is, it's working, and Pete Carroll's done a great job. Next, we have Robert Saleh. Look, the Jets have a winning record. So I think that was unexpected. So I think he deserves credit for that. He deserves credit for being a good defensive coach. Great, he's good energy, but that offense really struggles, and I question his offensive play calling. So I think Robert Saleh is probably a C-tier coach for the Jets. We move on to Ron Rivera, Riverboat Ron, who has made the Commanders look pretty good this year, and in his tenure with the Commanders or Washington football team before, he's done a pretty good job. They've played better than people expect. He's made Taylor Heineke look good, so a lot of credit to a good veteran coach in Ron Rivera. A tier, B tier. You know what? I like Ron Rivera a lot. I'm going to put him in A tier. Controversial as it might be, I like him a lot. He's a good veteran coach. He took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. He made Cam Newton into an MVP, and so he deserves a lot of credit for that. Sean McDermott, he's done a very good job since he started with the Bills. They haven't missed the playoffs since he's been their coach. Good all-around coach. Offense, defense made Josh Allen look really good, obviously. One of the more fun teams to watch. The Bills, obviously a contender. I think Sean McDermott is a solid A-tier coach. I mean, he has a pretty good sample size. I think this will be the 4th straight year they make the playoffs, and all 4 years I think he's been the Bills coach. They've made the playoffs, so credit to him. From one Sean to another, Sean McVay. Look, it's been a disastrous year for the Rams. Absolutely disastrous. One of the worst title defense teams ever. And they're not going to make the playoffs this year. But what you can't take away from Sean McVay is that he's won a Super Bowl, and he's a historically important coach. He created this new era, inspired this new era of young coaches. So Sean McVay's done a lot for the NFL, and every year they are a contender basically, except for this year. He's got the Super Bowl. Players love him. He's high energy. I think Sean McVay, with last year's Super Bowl, solidified himself as an S-tier coach. He's obviously a great coach. I don't think you can deny that. What's happened this year has partially been his fault for this kind of lackluster, predictable offense, but part of it can also be attributed to the fact that they've had injuries, and Matthew Stafford, I don't think he's ever fully been healthy. And it's just been a tough year, they've lost some guys. I think they'll bounce back next year, so I don't think it can be fully held against Sean McVay. Last but not least, we end with one of the descendants of Sean McVay, Zac Taylor. He took the Bengals to the Super Bowl against all odds. He's made Joe Burrow look good. I think Zac Taylor is an A-tier coach. I really do. Again, one of these young coaches that Sean McVay kind of trailblazed the path for, and he's a descendant of Sean McVay. So Zac Taylor faced off against Sean McVay in the Super Bowl, took a last place Bengals team to the Super Bowl, and the Bengals will probably make the playoffs again. That's a really fun team to watch, obviously. Great offense, and he's a big part of it. So credit to Zac Taylor. So guys, that is the end of our NFL coaches tier list. Make sure to comment your opinions. As always, I'd love to hear them. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're an NFL fan and you haven't done so already. Why not? It's free. But with that being said, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.